Welcome to the very first episode of the Bible. I don't know how many episodes this series is going to be. My original plan was to just make each episode about one chapter in the Bible, but I don't know if I'm going to stick with that or not. But today I do have a set place that we are going to be in, and that is going to be Genesis chapter 1, verse 1 through chapter 2, verse 3, which is the very first days of creation. So, since we are just getting introduced to Genesis, we are going to look at what this book has for us. So it has the author, the date, and recipients. It has a theme, it has key themes, and it has the outline. Okay, yes, and it has the outline that we are going to somewhat be following. Alright, so the author and date and recipients, let's look at that. Traditionally, Moses is considered to have been the author of Genesis and the rest of the Pentateuch. See Numbers. Okay. Of course, Moses lived much later than the events of Genesis. Presumptively, stories were passed down about those earlier events, and Moses brought them all together. The first audience would have been the Israelites Moses led through the wilderness. For readers today, Genesis is essentially is an essential introduction to the rest of the Bible. It is rightly called the Book of Beginnings. So that is what the name Genesis means. It means beginnings, Book of Beginnings. And so the theme of Genesis is creation, sin, and recreation. So today we're going to be looking at that creation, which is the first 7 days of creation. God made the world very good, but first cursed it and then destroyed it in the flood because of man's disobedience. The new world after the flood was also spoiled by human sin. God chose Abraham for a special purpose. Through his families, all nations would be blessed. God's purpose will eventually be fulfilled through Abraham's descendants. The Lord. Okay, so now we have key themes. So I think this is going to be about different sections of Genesis. I don't really know if we need to read that, but we don't need to read that. And then the outline that we're going to be following. So it's split into two parts, before Abraham and after Abraham. Basically, there's names like primeval history and patriarchal history. Basically, it's just before Abraham and then after Abraham. So the first part before Abraham is Genesis chapter 1 verse 1 through 11:26, and the last is 11:27 through 50:26. So then there it is split up like this: God's creation and ordering of the heavens and the earth, 1:1 through 2:3, that's what we're going to be looking at today. Earth's first people, 2:4 through 4:26. Adam's descendants, 5:1 through 6:8. That's a genealogy. Noah's descendants, 6:9 through 9:29. The descendants of Noah, 10:9 through 11:9. That's a genealogy, and it also contains the Tower of Babel in there. And then Shem's descendants, genealogy. Terah's descendants, 11:27 through 25:18. That's the story of Abraham. Isaac's descendants, 25:19 through 37:1. That is the story of Isaac and Rebekah. And then Jacob and Joseph and the rest of the Bible after that. Today we're going to be in the very beginning of Genesis, and we're going to be looking at creation. So I am using the ESV version. I forget what that acronym stands for, but ESV, I don't know. Something standard version? Student version? I don't know. But it does have notes at the bottom here. I don't know if you'll be able to see it or not. Yeah, so that's the actual Bible, and then there's notes right there. And so I'll be looking through those also, because my goal is to spend 2 hours talking about the book of Genesis, and so I'm going to be thinking things through, and I'm going to be looking at this and trying to figure out what exactly God is telling us. So in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. That is the very first Bible verse that I ever memorized. Um, and I haven't memorized that many. But whenever I first started reading the Bible, I started off in Genesis. I think that if you want to read the Bible on your own, you should probably start in the Gospels, probably. But if you're going to be dedicating hours a day to reading the Bible, then I think you should go cover to cover because you'll just get the whole story in one go. But so in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. And so what does this tell us? Well, the first thing that it tells us is that, we could look at this way, that the scientific idea of the creation of the universe is wrong. Because, the Big Bang Theory, it talks about how there were, well, it's not really widely known, but the most accepted theory, and this is a theory, there's no evidence for this, this is just what scientists have kind of accepted, was that there was energy before the Big Bang, but maybe the energy wasn't as we know it, and it was kind of appearing and disappearing randomly. It was very strange. We don't really understand it very well. And then that energy eventually transforms into matter, which I'm completely okay with the energy turning into matter. I'm just not okay with there being energy before the Big Bang, or there being energy that could appear and disappear. To me, that just doesn't make any sense. And so there's this one book. I don't have enough faith to be an atheist. I think that I would enjoy reading that one. But yeah, to me, it's way more reasonable that God created the heavens and the earth. And it's also very important to accept this as a fact. One of the things that we are going to see very early on in the book of Genesis is the fall. Now, the fall of mankind is a prideful fall. Adam's sin is pride, and Eve's sin is pride. And what are they doing? They're trying to define what is right and wrong for themselves. They're saying that what God has laid out for them, the path that God has laid out for them, is not the ideal path. It's not the path that they should take, and they think that they have a better idea of what is good and what is evil, and that is the pride. The pride is saying that I can create the heavens and the earth. I can create the moral order myself because I'm better than God, I'm smarter than God, or what God has set out for me is not right. Another thing, I think I'm going to have to look for this a little bit, but I think it is Job. Maybe it's Job 40 something. Don't want to mess that up. Let's see. I think it might be 38. The Lord answers Job. Then the Lord answered Job out of the whirlwind and said, Who is this that darkens counsel by words without knowledge? Dressed for action like a man. I will question you, and you make it known to me. Where were you when I laid the foundations of the earth? Tell me if you have understanding. Who determined its measurements? Surely you know. Or who stretched the line upon it? On what where were its bases sunk? Or who laid its cornerstone? When the morning stars sang together, and all the sons of God shouted for joy, or who shut in the sea with doors, when it burst out from the womb, and when I made clouds its garments, and thick darkness its swaddling band, and prescribed limits for it, and set bars on and doors, and said, Thus far shall you come, and no further, and here your proud waves be swayed. And I think he goes on for a while. Yeah, that's like a whole extra chapter. So we don't have to read all of that. But you get the point. The point is that God made the heavens and the earth, and you didn't. So, right here, this is a description. It's the Bible is already telling us what we need to do. And what we need to do is treat God like he is the creator. Oh, treat God like he is the creator of the heavens and the earth. And when we don't do this, we are not worshiping God. So the very first verse in the Bible is teaching us about the very first commandment: love the Lord your God, or worship the Lord your God. Okay, so so in the beginning, it also tells us that the earth has a beginning. At least, like maybe it's not saying that the universe has a beginning, but it's at least saying that the earth has a beginning. It's saying that God made the heavens and the earth. And what was before the beginning? What was before the beginning was God, right? Because if God wasn't before the beginning, then how would he get there in the beginning? He would have to have been created. And then in order for his creator to exist, he would have had to been made and had to been made and had to been made. So immediately this tells us that God is eternal. The very first verse in the Bible, very three first words in the Bible tell us that God is eternal. And so we already have a pretty decent description of God. God created the heavens and the earth. He created the moral order. We were supposed to obey him, and he's eternal. And if you just have that, you can have a very strong relationship with God, but it goes deeper. God. The word God is the word Elohim. Now it's a plural word. So in the Bible, whenever it says you are worshiping false gods, the word gods is Elohim in Hebrew. Now in the beginning, Elohim created the heavens and the earth. Well, it is very clear to us in the Bible that God is one. There is one God, and if you worship multiple gods, you are committing idolatry, even if you're still worshiping God. If you're worshiping God, Jesus Christ, and you're also worshiping Allah, and you're also worshiping Hinduism gods, you are still committing idolatry. But it's saying Elohim, and Elohim is plural. So how does this make sense? How can you take a plural word and then make it singular? Well, I'm sure this has this has a note right here. The Hebrew word for God, Elohim, is plural, possibly to refer to possibly to express God's majesty, but the verb created is singular. Okay, so here's another possibility. It's possibly to express his majesty, which maybe it's saying that God is so powerful that he is like multiple gods but put together, if that makes sense. I think this might be referring to the Trinity. I don't really have a good enough reason to make that assumption just yet, but it makes sense to me that this would be referring to the Trinity, because we Christians, I suppose, we Christians and Jews believe that the Bible is not just, I mean, I say just, but not just as in like, it's not that much. But the Bible isn't written by human hands and nothing else. The Bible is written by human hands, but God, the Holy Spirit, is within the people, inspiring them, making sure that the Bible is without mistakes. Now, was the Bible around, or at least the ideas of the Bible around before it was written down? Yes. Could they have been fixed up over time to become what they are now? Probably. The Bible was probably changed up. The writer of the Torah probably changed the Bible. The stories in the Bible are, especially in Genesis, but really throughout the whole Bible, are very condensed. There's a lot in every single line. And so, of course, maybe the stories of the Bible were longer. Now, I do think that the general theme, I don't think that, like, ideas changed. I think that they were fine-tuned, if that makes sense. But I think that all of this was happening because God was with these people and he was helping these people. Okay. So the word created is bara. So bara is specific to God. You wouldn't say that a human being bara'd something, that a human being created something in the way that God created it, because the word bara means to create from nothing. And so here we get another detail about the creation of the universe, that there was nothing and that God made that thing. So created out of nothing. And we see later in verse 3, and God said, let there be light, and there was light. And on day 2, God said, let there be an expanse. And God said, let the waters under the expanse. That's day 3. So we see every single time, it's not, and God took the energy and formed it into matter, or the energy became matter and God molded it. It's God said, and then it appeared. It came into existence out of nothing. And so that's another detail about the creation. And then the heavens and the earth. Now, the heavens, there's two types of heavens. You have the heavens, which is just the sky, and then you have the heavens, like the spiritual realm. And maybe you could say that like outer space is like a type of heaven as well. So, I don't think it says it here. Yeah, and God called the expanse heaven. And there was evening and there was morning. So the second day God makes the sky, and he calls the sky heaven. Now, that doesn't mean that heaven is in the clouds. That just means that the clouds are a form of, they're a way that you could describe the sky is the heavens. That does not mean that God is resting in the heavens. God is resting in a place that probably isn't even in the universe. It might be in the universe, but it's probably not in the universe. We don't really know much about heaven. But we do know that the place that we are going to go, the heaven that we're going to live in forever, for eternity, is going to be in a new earth. Now, what that means, we don't really know, because it's in the book of Revelation, and the book of Revelation is a very symbolic language. And in order to understand the book of Revelation, you've got to read the rest of the Bible. You've got to understand it. Now, verse 2, the earth was without form and void, and darkness was over the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the face of the waters. So, the earth was without form and void. I struggled to understand what this meant for quite a while. And the reason was I didn't truly understand what the 7 days of creation, 6 days of creation, because on the 7th day, God didn't create anything. But the first week of creation, I didn't understand what it truly was. And of course, it is the creation of the universe as we know it. But I think that there are some metaphorical things and some other things that we can take away other than this is how God made the heavens and the earth. Because in my view, the Bible is at least fine-tuned. Maybe it wasn't changed over time. Maybe it was all written down at once. Maybe, right? But either way, I think it is fine-tuned to where everything in the Bible is there for a reason. And so you've got to ask yourself, what's the reason for Genesis 1:1 through 2:3? What's the reason for the 7 days of creation? And I don't think that it is, this is how God made the earth, and that's the only thing that there is to it. I think there's stuff that is so much deeper within Genesis 1:1 through 2:3. So the earth was without form and void. And so what exactly does that mean? It means that whenever God created the heavens and the earth, he didn't do it all at once. And you've got to ask yourself, okay, why didn't he do it all at once? Because he could have. God could have just said, make earth as I want it to be. And boom. And then Adam and Eve could have just appeared. And it would have been, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. And then there was the serpent that tempted Eve. It could just go straight into that story if he wanted to. But he didn't. He spent 6 days creating it, 1 day resting. He spent a week working on the heavens and the earth. Why? I think that Genesis 1 through 2 3, the story of the 7 days of creation, is not just a description of what God did, it's a description of what we are supposed to do ourselves. And so it wouldn't be fair to God to say, okay, here's my example to you, and then he just like speaks the entire earth into existence, and then it's like, all right, now, good luck with you guys. He actually shows us the steps that he takes in order to create the heavens and the earth, in order to create the earth. So God makes the heavens and the earth, but the earth was without form and void, and darkness was over the face of the deep. So God makes the heavens and the earth, but they are unproductive. They're not, and it's not in its final form. It's like a blank piece of paper, and God's going to begin writing on it in verse 3, and ending in verse, I think it's verse 31 is when he stops writing on the paper. He stops his drawing. Now, this applies to us because whenever we start something, we aren't going to immediately have success. We have to constantly work on it, maybe longer than a week, but let's say we have to work on it for a week, we have to work on it for 6 days, and at the end, on the 7th day, we are not just resting, but we have finished our work, and we bless it. So the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep. Without form and void, that means that the earth was unproductive, which makes sense because in verse and day 3, God makes it productive by planting plants, and then day 6 is whenever he gives animals. Animals actually appear in day 5. Day 5 is the birds and the sea creatures, and then day 6 is the land animals and the humans. And so God, he makes it productive. And so, like me with this YouTube channel, when I first clicked create channel, there was nothing on it. I didn't have a name. I didn't even have a channel name. I didn't have a channel banner. I didn't have a profile picture. I didn't have any videos on there. I had 0 subscribers, 0 views, 0 hours of watch time, $0 made. Still have $0 made. I had to work on it for 6 days in order to make it productive. And so it is an example from God of how we are supposed to live our lives. And so I actually, for a while, I had my life kind of designed in this way. My YouTube video production was designed in a way where it somewhat accurately represented this. But I think that it might go deeper than the surface on what it's even saying, and that's what I'm going to try and do in this video, is figure out what it's saying. So when the Spirit of God was hovering over the face of the waters. Bum, bum, bum. So what does this mean? Well, the Spirit of God, that's interesting, because maybe that tells us, okay, well, so we've already learned that God is eternal, and that God is not made out of matter. He's not made out of energy, because in the beginning God created matter and energy and time. Matter, space, and time. Matter and energy are kind of in the same category, I'd think. And so the Spirit of God, that's interesting, because you could say that the Spirit of God, well, it could also be the Holy Spirit. And so in this translation, the ESV, Spirit is capitalized, so it's capital S, and then of God. And so that might be referring to the Holy Spirit in the Old Testament. And so maybe the second verse of the Bible is referring to the Holy Spirit, in which case the God, the Elohim we were talking about, would make sense. It would make sense if you interpreted that as being the Holy Spirit. And then was hovering over the face of the waters. And so, what actually does this mean? Well, if we take our interpretation of what we're beginning to interpret this as, which is a description of how we are supposed to live our lives and an instruction on how we're supposed to live our lives, then we can interpret the Spirit of God was hovering over the face of the waters as the Spirit of God was hovering over his blank sheet of paper, and he was hovering over potential, what he could create. And that would be what the waters is. The water is chaos, potential, possibility. What feminine? I don't know which one's right. There's yin and yang. I don't know which one's which, but yin or yang. Um, and then God, of course, would be the masculine, the yin or yang, the habitable, the order, because there's order and there's chaos, and so God, order is hovering over chaos. Or you could say, because it does say the Spirit of God, you could say the Spirit of God who creates order, and as we have just looked at in the very first verse, who created the moral order of the universe. So, and God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. And so God speaks into existence. And that's interesting. That's interesting because maybe we can speak into existence. And we'll get back to that later. Wow, I didn't even know that this book of the Bible existed. Nahum. I don't recognize that. Huh, weird. We actually just flipped right to it. So I'm going to 1 John, or John chapter 1. 1 John is actually a different book. Alright, John chapter 1, verse 1, the Word became flesh. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God, and all things were made through him, and without him was not anything made that was made. In him was life, and the life was the light of men. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. There was a man sent from God, whose name was John. He came as a witness to bear witness about the light, that all might believe through him. He was not the light, but he came to bear witness about the light. Verse 14, and the Word became flesh, and dwelt among us, and we have seen his glory, glory as the only Son of the Father, full of grace and truth. John bore witness about him, and he cried out, "This is the one whom I said, he who comes after me ranks before me, because he was before me. For his fullness we have all received grace upon grace. For the law was given through Moses, grace and truth came through Jesus Christ. No one has ever seen God, the only God, who is at the Father's side. He has made him known." So we see that in the beginning was the Word was with God, and the Word was God. So the Word was God. So who is the Word? Verse 14, and the Word became flesh and dwelt among us. And so I guess I should have mentioned this whenever we talked about verse 1, but it also works in verse 3, and I'll explain why. Because in the beginning was Jesus, or in the beginning Jesus created the heavens and the earth. In the beginning, Christ created the heavens and the earth. And so John 1:1 and then John 1:14 helps us to see how in the beginning Christ created the heavens and the earth. And then we just talked about in verse 2, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the face of the waters. And so if we take John chapter 1 and we take Genesis chapter 1 verses 1 through 2, we can see the full Trinity there, just right there. And 3 verses in the Bible, and we see the entire Trinity. Now, of course, the word Trinity itself is not used in the Bible, and that's fine. But the idea of the Trinity is very present in the Bible. We can even see this. We can go to the book of Matthew. There we go. Let's see. Matthew 28. And Matthew 28, verses 16 through 20. Now the 11 disciples went to Galilee, to the mountain to which Jesus had directed them. And when they saw him, they worshipped him. But some doubted. And Jesus came and said to them, All authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. Go therefore and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit, teaching them to observe all I have commanded you. And behold, I am with you always to the very end of the age. So we see right there that Jesus is talking about the Trinity. So the Trinity is a biblical idea. And I think that it's right here, nested within the very first two verses of the Bible. And maybe even nested within the very fourth word in the entire Bible, Elohim. And God said, Let there be light, and there was light. And God said, well, we just explained, and we often believe now even, that God is not a physical being except for Jesus. Jesus is a physical being, but the Father and the Holy Spirit are not physical beings. Because in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. If God was before the beginning, then how was matter before the beginning? So, how can God speak? And it's an interesting idea to say that, and Jesus said, Let there be light. And it's at least partially true because Jesus is God. But was it Jesus himself, like as we know Jesus, who actually spoke that into existence? And I don't think there's anywhere in the Bible where it would tell us that. But it does say, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. So Jesus was in the beginning with God, because he is God, so he's eternal. And so maybe he's the one that spoke these words into existence. And it does say, we're going to look at it later, I think it's chapter 3, that God was walking in the garden. And so, of course, it can be using metaphor, and it might be using metaphor. And the Jews would believe that this is metaphor, because they don't believe in the idea of the Trinity. But I think it's entirely possible that Jesus was right here, and he's the one that spoke into existence, he's the one that was walking in the garden, and we just get the whole idea of the Trinity and who God really is in the first 3 chapters of the Bible. And God said, Let there be light. So if you look at verse 2, the earth was without form and void, and darkness was over the face of the deep. And the Spirit of God was hovering over the face of the waters. And God said, Let there be light, and there was light. So we have darkness, and then God makes light. So we see this contrast of light and darkness in the world. Jesus says, I am the light of the world. Whoever walks with me does not walk in darkness, but walks in light. And you see the idea that when you are in darkness, you stumble over things, you walk into things. I've had my fair share of those. I got up to go pee one night, and then I walked through my door right there to get out of the bathroom. And as I walked, because you move your knees when you walk, so I moved my knee to bring my leg up, and then just bam, smacked the wall. I was so close to walking out, but because I couldn't see, I ran right into the wall. And so those who walk in darkness are going to stumble. Now, stumbling is really a metaphor for sinning. If you are not in the presence of God, if God's light is not shining down on you, you are not going to be able to see properly, or maybe you do see properly, which would be worse. That's a really interesting idea I just discovered. So when you sin and you don't know who God is, you sin, and that's wrong. But if you know who God is and you sin, you know that what you just did was wrong. And so the Bible says that it is worse that you murder somebody while knowing that it's wrong. It's worse for you to do that than for you to murder somebody but not know that it's wrong. And so it's worse for you to be in darkness and then stumble than it is for you to be in light and then stumble. Because in darkness, you can't see, and so you stumble, and it's like, well, that makes a lot more sense. I mean, you still should have been careful, but you couldn't see ahead of you, so obviously you were going to stumble. When you have light, you can see in front of you. When you have the light of God, you can see the options that you have in front of you. And yet you still choose. You choose to stumble now because you see it and you go, oh, well, it's going to be fine. I'm just going to stumble once. I'll get back up, so it's fine. That's also a really good metaphor, I'd think. People say whenever they sin, they say, oh, I'm going to sin, but he's going to forgive me. But it's like, if you're walking forward, why would you fall over? Like, yeah, you could get back up and keep walking, but you didn't have to fall over. You could have just kept walking straight, but you chose to fall over because you were like, oh, well, if I fall over, then I can just get back up, so it's fine. It's like, no, that's a dumb idea. It's a dumb idea to try and walk to your destination and then just purposely fall every 5 minutes. Like, why don't you just walk straight upward? And so that's the Christian life. The Christian life is you're following God, and every time you sin, you're choosing to fall over because you're like, oh, well, I'll just get back up after I fall. And so that's kind of a dumb idea. Okay. And God said, let there be light, and there was light. So now this shows us the authority that God has. God has the authority to simply speak things into existence. He could say to this, he could say disappear, and it would just poof away. Alright, he only has to speak it into existence. And so while I think that this is an example of how we are supposed to live our lives, we are still seeing the authority that God has that we don't have. We can't speak things into existence. Just kidding. We actually can speak things into existence. Not exactly, not always, right? You can't just say to yourself, $1 million just appear in my bank account, and then it's gonna just appear in there. Like, that's not gonna happen, obviously, right? But there is actually a form of speaking things into existence that we can do. Anybody who's watched the YouTube channel called Vsauce, he has a Mind Field series. I think he ended it because I think the last episode was 8 years ago. But in one of the episodes, he had 3 kids. They were 9, 10 years old. I think one girl was 12. There was a guy that was 10, and a guy that was 9. So young people. I don't think that's relevant, but they were. And the girl, picked her skin. So she picked at her skin, and it looked like she had a skin disease on her skin. You could tell. You could really tell. It was all red, and it was you could see it. Yeah, it was gross. The other kid had ADHD or something. He couldn't focus, and then the other kid had headaches and migraines. I think he played soccer or he played a sport, and he got some head injuries. There we go. They took all 3 of the kids and they put them in a little MRI machine. This one's almost empty, so I'll use this. So an MRI machine is like this. It's like a tube, but there's a square thing. And there's a tube, and then you put the person inside the tube, and it scans their body basically. And so they put these kids in the MRI machine, and they told them, that they were going to relax because of it, and then they told them that after the process, I think it was about 6 weeks that they did it, and they did it once a week or something. Maybe it was 12 weeks. It was a month to 2 months to 3 months. So honestly, for the thing that happened, It wasn't that long. So they put them in there and they told him, this is going to heal you. This is going to help you. He comes back 10, 12 weeks later, and the kid that had headaches no longer has headaches. The kid that had ADHD is focusing much better. The girl that was peeling her skin looks much better. She stopped doing it. She doesn't even want to do it anymore. She actually said that whenever she was peeling her skin, she enjoyed it. So obviously, if you enjoy doing something, it's going to be a lot harder to quit. She stopped doing it. She stopped enjoying it. The MRI machine was turned off. There was no scanning, no medication, no laser stuff. It was purely the fact that they believe they were going to be healed from going into the MRI machine. And so that's quite interesting, because what it tells us is that if you have a terrible disease like cancer, like other diseases that don't have an easy cure or any cure really, what it tells us is that, yeah, maybe not just simply and only believing with your mind that it's going to go away is going to fully cure it. Maybe it's not going to do it alone. Maybe you're going to have medication, and if you also believe, that could save you. And I think that is true. But it might just, it will at least likely, if you actually truly believe that you're going to stop being sick and you're going to be healed, if you simply just tell yourself it and you believe it, you just ingrain it in your mind that you're going to be healed and that you're going to live, your life is going to get better. You're going to be less sick. I'm telling you, this is the truth. An interesting thing is, I was scrolling on YouTube Shorts the other day, and I found this video, and he's like, this is the cure to all hiccups. This works for everybody. He was talking about how there are many cures that work for some people and some cures that don't work for other people. Like salt, a lollipop, or something sour, drinking water. All these things, they work for some people, they don't work for other people, and they're not really that good of a solution. There is one solution that works for every single person. Every single person this solution works for, as long as you can truly believe what you say. And all you have to do is tell yourself that you don't have hiccups. That is 100% true. I am telling you it works. The next time you have hiccups, tell yourself, oh, I don't have hiccups. Instantly. I'm not saying that, oh, you get 3 more hiccups and then it stops. Instantly. You could be mid-hiccup and it just stops. Instantly. It's gone. All because you told yourself that you don't have hiccups anymore. And then it's gone. And it's like your brain. And so in the beginning, God created your brain, and He made it that way. And so we can talk about this a little bit, because you could say that if you're an atheist, for example, how do you describe the miracles of Jesus? Now, everybody that studies history believes that Jesus at least existed. He was at least, a human being that existed. Maybe he wasn't God according to their belief. Of historians and scholars, okay, he wasn't God, but I'll give the Christians this: he did exist. Now, then you have to talk about the miracles. What about the miracles? How did those happen? And there is an interesting thing that Jesus says, at least sometimes whenever people are healed. Sometimes he says, okay, I'll heal you. Sometimes he also says, let it be done according to your faith, or you have been healed according to your faith. If you believe that I can do this, it will be done. And so what does that mean for this example? Well, you could say that theoretically you'd have to describe how people would be literally paralyzed and blind and then stop being paralyzed and blind. But you could say for the smaller things, like being sick, of course, he raised people from the dead, and so there's those miracles that you still really can't explain. Because how is a dead person supposed to believe that they're alive and then be healed by their own brain? Like, that doesn't work like that. When you're dead, you can't think, right? But you could say that things like healing people's sickness and like skin diseases, leprosy, would just be that, oh, well, it's because they believed that he would heal them, and then so that mind field thing that I just talked about, just believing it happened and happened to them, and then that's why they were healed. You could say that. You could also say that the reason that whenever you believe things, it physically changes your body is because God's doing it. God's behind it all. And I don't believe that necessarily, but you could say that, and it's reasonable to say that. But we at least know the power behind telling yourself things. There was a dermatologist that I went through. I don't know if you can see it now. My hands are actually way better. Maybe you have to get a little bit close. Maybe you can see it a little bit. That my hands are like a different color than my arms. They used to be really bad. They used to be like actually red. They were actually like red like 3 weeks ago. You would be shocked to see like a picture of them. I think my parents took a picture. I'm not sure. I don't think I have a picture of it. But I went to a dermatologist because of this. And she was talking to my mother. So my mom and her were talking. I wasn't really talking to her. And she was talking about how when people say negative things, they make fun of people, they bully people, they talk about how they're never going to be successful, they're a loser in life, and they keep saying these things over and over to themselves, and they go online and they spread hate to other people. Like, they get sicker, their cells become like destructive, and it's crazy to think that. It's crazy to think that whenever you just live a life where you're spreading negativity everywhere, it comes back on you. And because of you, like directly because of the fact that you're saying all these terrible things to other people, your own body cells are like destroying themselves. And I don't know if that's what she was saying or if she believes this, but I think that the opposite is true. If you go around, you spread positivity, you spread a loving, kind message, the message of the gospel. And when I say a kind message, I don't mean a message that makes everybody feel happy. I mean a kind message as in you could be like, you are going to go to hell if you don't accept Jesus Christ. That's a kind message because you are telling people the truth and you are concerned for other people. So that's what I mean by kind. But whenever you are going out and you are spreading this message of positivity, of the fact that if you take on responsibility, if you bear your cross and you follow Jesus Christ, your entire life is going to change for the better. You are going to be healthier physically. You're going to physically be healthier. Now, of course, Job went through a bunch of pain and suffering. And I'm not saying that if you believe in Jesus and if you go around spreading this positivity, that you're never going to be sick in your life ever. That's not what I'm saying. What I am saying is that you're going to be healthier if you do this. And the reason being is that you are going to trick your brain cells into making you a healthier human being. When who wouldn't want that, right? I don't know how I've managed to spend 50 minutes talking about 30 verses. And God saw that the light was good. And God separated the light from the darkness. Verse 4. So God saw that the light was good. So this expands on on the thing that I pointed out earlier about the relationship between light and darkness, right? People who walk in darkness, they can't see, and so of course they stumble, and people that walk in light choose to stumble. Or they blindfold themselves and make themselves in darkness. Now here, God is saying that the light that he made was good. And this is not an accident. We see that every time God makes something, and God, that one doesn't say it. And God saw that it was good, and God saw that it was good. So it repeats it. I'm very sure every single day, all the 6 days, it says, and God saw that it was good, and then God. I have a text message. Oh no. Oh. Alright, if you guys want a side story. Oh, dude, no. Oh, this is so bad. Okay, so I meet up with my youth pastor. Um, it's supposed to be every Tuesday, but sometimes Tuesday doesn't work out, apparently. So today, was today Wednesday? I hope today's Wednesday. Okay, yes, today is Wednesday. I've got my days down. So I've been doing a VBS, and so VBS is from 5:30 p.m. to 8 p.m. And like all the staff there, we're all confused on what day it is because it feels like it's been so long. But anyways, mostly because of VBS. Yesterday, I was supposed to meet with my youth pastor Andrew, and we were going to have our discussion on Genesis 17, and this is all after the covenant. So I think this is where God promises the birth of Isaac. We were supposed to talk about that, and me and my mom, we both forgot, completely forgot. Now, of course, like I can't drive there. I don't have my driver's license yet. But we forgot, and so I went to him Tuesday. We were supposed to meet at 1:30, and so we went there at 5:30. Really, it was 5 because we had to get the stuff ready for the VBS. And I was like, man, I'm so sorry that we forgot that we had a meeting today. And it's like, oh yeah, dude, it's fine. He's a pretty chill guy. And so I was like, okay, I'll meet you tomorrow at 1:30. And then right before we left, I told my mom, all right, we got to get to him at 1:30 tomorrow. And she's like, oh, I have work tomorrow, so we're going to do it Thursday. And so he just texted me and said, I'm here, are you? I forgot we're meeting tomorrow. So he just drove all the way there. Oh, man. Okay, well. So. All because we forgot. This whole thing happened because we forgot. Well, at least we meet at Whataburger, so at least he's probably going to get himself some lunch. Okay. And God saw that the light was good. So everything that God makes is good. And so this kind of expands, and you could say it also confirms what we discussed in verse 1, where it said God created the heavens and the earth. And we went over to Job 38, verse 4. I think we read through like 10 or something. And God is explaining to Job that he created the heavens and the earth, and he made them in the proper way. So this is part of the reason as to why I said that in the beginning God created the heavens and earth. And that's why I said that means that God made the moral order of the universe, because in Job 38, verse 4, God says, where were you when I laid the foundation of the earth? were you there whenever I made the length of the earth, the width of the earth? Were you there whenever I told the waters to stop here and the land to stop there? Were you there whenever I created the universe, whenever I created the moral order? And God is saying this in response to Job's complaint. So the story of Job, if you don't know, Satan comes to God, and God is like, look at my servant Job. He's a very good person. Have you considered him? He's without blame. And Satan's like, yeah. He only follows you because you've blessed him so much. You've given him 10 kids, a beautiful wife. You've given him wealth, prosperity, and servants. You've given him a nice, easy life. So of course he's gonna follow you because he has everything he'd ever ask for. Take it all away from him, and then he'll curse you to your face. God's like, okay, I allow you to do whatever you want, just don't touch him himself. And so Satan allows his 10 children to die. I think it's 7 sons and 3 daughters, I think. Or maybe it's 7 daughters and 3 sons. 10 kids, 7 and 3. His servants, his livestock, his house, or the places that the kids were eating in, fell in. And then Satan goes back up to God after all this, and so Job doesn't curse God. He still remains faithful to God. His wife tells him, why are you still believing in God? Why don't you curse God and die? And so he's tempted to do this by his own wife, but he never curses God. Now he does curse his birth, and he's questioning God, why is this happening to me? I've been righteous and yet I'm suffering. And so he's confused on why this is happening to him, of course. But he doesn't curse God. He doesn't rebel against God. And then so Satan goes back up to heaven to speak with God. And God's like, have you considered my servant Job? Even though you took all this stuff away from him, he is still loyal to me. And Satan's like, yeah. He's only loyal to you because you haven't struck him with disease. Let him be struck with disease and skin disease, and he'll curse you to your face. God's like, all right, you can go and you can inflict disease and sores on his skin, just don't take his life. And so he does that, and Job becomes sick, and he's got sores on his skin, and he's taking glass, and he's peeling the stuff off. And so you can go read the book of Job. It's in the middle of the Bible. It's right before Psalms. And Psalms, I think Psalms or in Jeremiah is the middle area of the Bible, and it's right before that. And Job questions why God allowed any of this to happen, and reasonably so. It's very reasonable for someone who's gone through that much pain and suffering to question the person who made the moral order of the universe. God, why did you make life like this? Why? And one of the things that suffering can teach us is that suffering is a result of human sin, and so when we suffer, it's kind of a reminder saying, hey, make sure you aren't sinning. And so suffering can actually be turned into a good thing if you look at it the right way. But Job questions what God did. But right here it says, and God saw that the light was good. And God saw that it was good. And God saw that it was good. And behold, God looked at everything that he had made, and behold, it was all very good. So we see that not only is what God makes good, it's very good. It is perfect. There is without flaw, just like God himself. So what God made is perfect, and we are not to reject it. When we do reject it, we are being prideful, and we are saying to God, no, actually, I know how to set things in the right place. And that is the fall. That is Adam and Eve's sin. Adam and Eve's sin is saying, look, you made the earth like this, but that's not good enough, and so, nope. Alright, skip ahead a minute or something. I'm going to go fill up my water bottles. Alright. Well, I spent half of the assumed time of this episode on the first 4 verses. So, let's hope that I can get through more than 8 more verses. Alright. And God, so we're not even done with the first 4 yet. And God separated the light from the darkness. So, and I haven't even really finished my full thought on light and darkness and what exactly that means, what exactly that idea is. Because Jesus talks about light and darkness in the New Testament. Okay, well, so also in the book of Revelation, when it talks about the new heavens and the new earth, it says that in the kingdom that we're going to live in, God is going to be our light. There's not going to be a sun and a moon like the earth that we have right now, because in that new heavens, everything is going to be changed. It's going to be a whole new thing that we're going to be in. It's not going to be anything like the life that we live right now, right? We're going to have eternal life. And so God is going to be our sun. Now, you could also say that God should be our sun right now. And why should God be our sun? Because we are supposed to rely on Him and His ideas and His beliefs, you could say, and His teachings in order to guide us through life. We should be using Him as our flashlight. And God separated the light from the darkness. So the light is, at least now, maybe it wasn't then, although it probably was separate, it at least now is separate, light and darkness. So darkness could be like sin, and light could be like righteousness, Satan, God, truth, lies, right, wrong, good, evil. And so God separated the light from the darkness. So God separated the chaos from the order. Or He separated the order from the chaos. That would be the correct thing there. And God separated the light from the darkness. He's establishing the proper way to conduct Himself and to conduct this process. Because again, this is an instruction for us. This is how we are supposed to live our life. And so we've got to separate the light from the darkness, or at least we've got to call on God to help us, or maybe even do it fully Himself, to separate that light from the darkness. So when you begin painting your picture frame, you've got to figure out what it is that you are going to do. You've got to have the plan in mind, the future picture in mind. And that's going to be day 2. That's what we're going to talk about in day 2. But right now, we're talking about establishing the moral order, establishing what it is that needs to be done. And what is the moral order? The moral order is the way in which you are supposed to conduct yourself in order to achieve a better life, in order to achieve the goal that you are trying to do. And so because of that, you've got to separate light from darkness, wheat from chaff, sheep and goat. And this discernment can only be done with the help of the Holy Spirit. God called the light day, and the darkness He called night. And there was evening, and there was morning, the first day. So God called the light day, the darkness He called night. So God is naming things now. Alright, well, where else do we see naming things? Genesis chapter 2. Okay. Chapter 2, verse 18. Then the Lord said, "It is not good that man should be alone. I will make him a helper fit for him." Now out of the ground the Lord God formed every beast of the field and every bird of the heavens, and brought them to the man to see whatever he would call them. And whatsoever the man called every living creature, That was its name. The man gave names to all livestock, and to the birds, and to the heavens, and to every beast of the field. But for Adam was not found a helper fit for him, a helpmeet fit for him. Oh, that's the King James version. This one says helper fit for him. Okay. So we see that God gives Adam the ability to name the animals. And so that would assist this view even more, that God is telling us what we are supposed to do. So we are supposed to name what? Well, not just naming animals, but naming what we're doing. Putting everything in its proper place. That's what we're doing here. And so whenever you first have your project in mind, you've got to create it, maybe out of nothing, but not exactly, not physically out of nothing, not telling the paper to appear, but to create it with your imagination, so out of nothing, technically. You've got to hover over the potential to see what it is that you could turn this piece of paper into. You've got to bring light to it and separate the light from the darkness, and then you've got to name the light and the darkness. You've got to set everything in order, and you've got to name it and put it in its proper place. And there was evening and there was morning the first day. All right. Well, that's one heck of a first day. And so I guess I also needed to consider the fact, what would that mean for my daily schedule? So I make YouTube videos, and so I don't have an answer for this just yet. But what would it mean for me to what would I do on my first day of creation of creating the video? And so I guess this would be the idea of the video. So the title, the thumbnail, the idea, just the general idea of what it is I'm going to do. Actually, yeah, that actually works quite well. Okay. Day 2. And God said, "Let there be an expanse in the midst of the waters, and let it separate the waters from the waters. And God made the expanse, and separated the waters that were under the expanse from the waters that were above the expanse. And it was so. And God called the expanse heaven. And there was evening, and there was morning, the second day." So, whenever I first read that, I had absolutely no idea what literally, like, surface level, I have no idea what this means. What do you mean there was an expanse? To put this in simple terms, God made the ocean and he made the sky. That's it. Now there's an interesting idea here, because it says, "And God said, let there be an expanse in the midst of the waters." So remember, verse 2, and the Spirit God was hovering over the face of the water. So there's water there. You could just imagine it. The earth is a big water balloon, and now it has light and darkness, and God is giving it a sky, an atmosphere. And God said, "Let there be an expanse in the midst of the waters, and let it separate the waters from the waters." And God made the expanse, and separated the waters that were under the expanse from the waters that were above the expanse. The waters under is just the sea, and the waters above is the sky. Now it says the waters. There's water above. Now you could say that these Judaism Israelites, Moses, wrote this because they were naive and they thought that the sky was water because it was blue and the ocean was blue. You could say that. But there's also a really interesting thing. So we go to Genesis. That's way too far ahead. Let's see. I'm going to have to look through this. Go into the ark for your household. Generation. Okay, I don't know where it says it actually. Maybe it's before. Well, somewhere in the flood narrative, it says that there were the gates of the heavens opened and the water fell into that. And so this makes sense now. This makes sense that the literal interpretation that there was water in the sky is actually true. There actually was water in the sky. And that water is what helped flood the earth. Now there is like the idea that it wasn't the whole earth that was flooded, but you do also have to explain, like, of course this is God's doing, but like how did he get so much water there? And so there being water in the sky already, like separate from that which is on earth, makes total sense. Makes total sense. Okay. And it was so. And God called the expanse heaven. And there was evening and there was morning the second day. So God speaks this into existence. You could say he manifests the idea of it into existence. Although God's actually speaking it, we're the ones that need to manifest it. And then he separates it, and then he names it. Speaks it, separates, names it. That's the exact same thing he did on day one, just with light and darkness. And now it's with the sky and the sea. And God said, let the waters under the heavens be gathered into one place, and let dry land appear. Or hang on. So this is day 3. And God said, let the waters under the heavens be gathered into one place, and let dry land appear. And it was so. God called the dry land earth, and the waters that were gathered together he called seas. And God saw that it was good. And God said, let the earth sprout forth vegetation, plants yielding seed, and fruit trees bearing fruit, in which is their seed, each according to its kind, on the earth. And it was so. The earth brought forth vegetation, plants yielding seed, according to their own kinds, trees bearing fruit, in which is their seed, each according to its kind. And God saw that it was good. And there was evening and there was morning the third day. So, this is a bit different. Now, the framework is the same. And God said, and it was so, and be gathered into one place, okay. God called the dry land earth, and the waters that were gathered together he called seas. So this time God doesn't separate. He gathers them, the seas together, and lets the land appear. So you could say that he separates the land and the earth now. So maybe you could say that he's still separating it. But it's not so clear that he is separating this now. And so I'll have to think about that, but maybe that's important. Now, he still names things, so he's still speaking and manifesting into existence what we do. He spoke it into existence, and then he named it. And then God said, let the earth sprout forth vegetation, and it was so. The earth brought forth vegetation, plants yielding seed according to each their kind. And God saw that it was good, and there was evening, and there was morning, the third day. So God names the earth and the seas that day. And he makes land. He separates the sea and the land. And then he brings vegetation on the land. So the earth is finally, at least to a degree, productive. And he's done that in 3 days. So that's pretty darn good. Day 4. And God said, let there be lights in the expanse of the heavens to separate the day from the night, and let them be for signs and for seasons, for days and years. And let them be lights in the expanse of the heavens to give light upon the earth. And it was so. And God made the two great lights, the greater light to rule the day, and the lesser light to rule the night, and the stars. And God set them in the expanse of the heavens, to give light on the earth, to rule over the day and over the night, to separate the light from the darkness. And God saw that it was good. And there was evening, and there was morning, the fourth day. Okay, I have some weird ideas about that, which I will talk about whenever I'm done with my bathroom break. Ka-chow! Okay. God said, "Let there be lights in the expanse of the heavens to separate the day from the night." So now he's back to separating stuff. He's separating the day from the night. The day from the night. Well, typically nighttime is a shorter period than the daytime. I think it always is, but maybe it's not. Maybe it's not always. Maybe there was a time whenever there wasn't, but for the most part, day on average is longer than the night. So what would that mean? That God's glory is greater than evil and suffering? Although it's infinitely greater, right? But it could mean that. It could mean that. Um, that you walk in the light longer than you walk in the night. Or that you should. You do, but that you should. Say, we sleep at night. That's an interesting idea. We sleep at night. Sleep, you are trusting in something, maybe yourself, but you're trusting in something that you can be basically unconscious. You can be dead, in a sense, for 8 hours every night, and you're trusting that no one's going to come and like murder you. Or maybe you're just naive enough to not think that that's going to happen, but it does happen. I don't know. Um, God said. Well, so the sun is now there to give light unto the earth. Now, okay, so that's an interesting idea, right? Because God creates light and darkness, but He just now creates light and darkness. So how does that work? So darkness is always present. Like, if there's no light, then there is darkness. Right, well, so God didn't create the darkness. It was there, and then God made the light, right? I don't think it says that God made the darkness. I don't think it says that. And God said, "Let there be light," and there was light, and God separated the light from the darkness. Well, so technically, by making the universe, darkness just had to exist. But he didn't. It doesn't necessarily say that he made the darkness itself. Although he made the universe in a way in which darkness is present if there isn't any light. So God's creating the light. Now, the greater light and the lesser light, I don't know really what to make of that. I was thinking maybe of kind of a way to represent like a marriage between a woman and a man, and like the man would be the sun in some way, and the woman would be the moon. But I don't really know what that would mean. Like what do you get from that? I mean, because obviously the moon is like way bigger, or the sun is way bigger than the moon. But that doesn't really fit into the biblical idea. Like the biblical idea really doesn't talk about men being greater than women. Not that much. Not in the Old Testament. And I don't think that the Bible anywhere is saying that men are greater than women, right? But I don't know. I don't know what that exactly would mean. And it's not clear to me at all in the biblical text that the Bible ever anywhere says that the job of a woman is lesser than a man. Anybody that thinks that the Bible is promoting any form of sexism against women is completely and utterly wrong. And I guess we'll get to talk about that. Because the idea is to get through the entire Bible. And so what, it'd be 1,200 divided by 50, because I'm doing one of these every single week. Or at least I'm going to upload once a week. That's the goal anyways. It would be... Come on, man, I can do this. 1,200 divided by 50 is what? 60? 120 maybe? No? Oh, come on. I have to use a calculator for this. 1,200 divided by 50. Okay. What? 1,200 divided by 100. Okay, so it's 24. 24 years. 24 years. Oh no. Uh-oh. Well, I guess I'm skipping the genealogies. So maybe it's going to be like 20 years. I did not think it was going to be that long. Yeah. Yeah, 20 years. Sounds about right. Okay. So like at least a decade. So I'm gonna be like 30 something whenever this is done. Um, I don't know why I brought that up. What was I thinking? Oh yes, we're going to go through the whole Bible, and I'm gonna explain why the Bible is not sexist. And that's because we were talking about the sun and the moon being masculine and feminine. Okay. So we still see the pattern, and God said, and it was so, and God made, and God separated, and it was good. The fourth day, the fifth day, and God said, let the waters swarm with swarms of living creatures, and let birds fly above the earth across the expanse of the heavens. So God created the great sea creatures and every living creature that moves, with which the waters swarm, according to their kinds, and every winged bird according to its kind. And God saw that it was good. And God blessed them, saying, be fruitful and multiply, and fill the earth and the seas, and let the birds multiply on the earth. And there was evening, and there was morning, the fifth day. Boom. Sound like I just broke my chair. Alright, so he makes the sea creatures, and he makes the birds. So something we didn't talk about. Let's go back a little bit. It's day 2. God makes the sky. He makes the heavens. Okay, well, so I talked about in day 1, I talked about the light and the darkness, and how that's like the yin and yang, the masculine and feminine, right and wrong, good and evil. Now, I think that the sea and the sky, the heavens, are just like the light and the darkness. Okay, so what is the sea? We talked about the sea being chaos and potential. We already talked about that in verse 2. And the Spirit of God was hovering over the face of the waters. He was hovering over potential. He was hovering over what could be, what he could do, what he could create. And we see that again. Now, God names the sea in day 3, but in day 2, he separates the sea and the sky. So what's the sky? The sky is the opposite. The sky is the yin or the yang, whichever one. I still don't remember which one's which, but whatever. It doesn't matter. So, heaven is what you're aiming to. Seek first the kingdom of heaven and his righteousness, and all these things will be added unto you. Seek first the kingdom of heaven and his righteousness. So in a way, you are aiming at the sky, right? Because the sky is called heaven, and God is not in the sky, he's in heaven, he's not in the sky, but the sky is called heaven. So, when you are aiming at the heavens, in a way you are aiming at God. And if you aim at the heavens properly, you are aiming at God. And so what he's doing is, he's separating chaos and order, and then in day 5, he orders the chaos by putting animals in it, and he orders the order by putting animals in it. Okay, so let's go to day 6. This day is the special day. And God said, let the earth bring forth living creatures according to their kinds, livestock and creeping things, and beasts of the earth according to their kinds. And it was so. And God made the beasts of the earth according to their kinds, and the livestock according to their kinds, and everything that creeps on the ground according to its kind. And God saw that it was good. Then God said, let us make man in our image, after our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the air, and over the livestock, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps on the earth. So God created man in his own image. In the image of God he created them, male and female he created them. And God blessed them, and God said to them, be fruitful and multiply, and fill the earth and subdue it, and have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the heavens, and over every living creature that moves on the earth. And God said, behold, I have given you every plant yielding a seed that is on the face of all the earth, and every tree with seed in its fruit. You shall have them for food. And to every beast of the earth, and to every bird of the heavens, and to everything that has the breath of, and to everything that creeps on the earth, and everything that has the breath of life. I have given every green plant for food, and it was so. And God saw everything that he had made, and behold, it was very good. And there was evening, and there was morning, the sixth day. That sounds like a long day. All right, well, let's go back to the beginning of the day. God creates the livestock. God says they appear. And God saw that it was good. Then God said, let us make man in our image, after our likeness. Bum, bum, bum. Who is he speaking to? I thought God was one. He is. But let us make man in our image, after our likeness. So whoever God is speaking to, he is saying, we are going to all be a part in this creation. Okay. Maybe he's speaking to the angels. Maybe he's speaking to the animals, because the serpent could talk, so maybe he's talking to the animals. And maybe after the fall, we lost our ability to communicate with the animals, right? Maybe. Go to verse 27, we skip a few lines. So God created man in his own image. In the image of God, he created them. Male and female, he created them. He, God, created them. Then God said, let us make man in our image. God made man in his image. He's not talking to the angels. He's not talking to the angels. Who's he talking to? He's talking to God. He's saying, let us make man in our image. And then it says, God made man in his image. So I hope that makes sense. But God is speaking to himself. What is he crazy? Is he crazy by speaking to himself? Maybe not. Maybe the Father is speaking to the Son. The Father and the Son are communicating with the Holy Spirit. Maybe. I don't see another possible interpretation. I just explained how it can't be the angels because I think I said it enough. He created them. Just keep going on. And let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the heavens, and over all the livestock, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps on the earth. This does not mean that animal abuse is okay. This does not mean that humans are created in a way where we can go and wreak havoc on the earth and do as we please in our own image, after our own likeness, to the earth. That's not what this means. And we see that in the next chapter. When God creates Adam and Eve, he says that they are to keep the garden after God makes the garden. He tells them to keep the garden and to keep it productive. And in no way is wreaking havoc over all the animals on the earth keeping the garden. So that's not what that means. What does it mean to have dominion over the fish of the sea, over the birds of the air, and over everything that creeps upon the earth? What it means is that we can freely eat of them, and it's not murder. So God created man in his own image. In the image of God he created them, male and female he created them. So we see the separation from man and the rest of the world. Really, it's just man, God, and then like the other rest of the world. They're in their own categories. So the God's not really in the category; he's more like above the whole category system itself. But we see that human beings are not one with the rest of creation. There's something different. They're made in the image, the very image of God. And because of that, they have dominion over the fish of the sea, the birds of the air, and the beasts that crawl over the earth. One of the things I've thought about recently is I go in this community, so it's called skool.com, skool.com, and one of the communities, it's like a self-improvement red pill community called it Adonis Gang, whatever. Um, One of the guys in there, he was a Christian, but he lost faith in Christianity. And he said that one of the reasons was animal suffering. Now, the first person, and for the most part, the only person that I've seen talk about animal suffering is Alex O'Connor. So I don't know if he started watching Alex O'Connor and that's why he lost faith or something. But we see that human beings are separated from animals. We are made in the image of God. And so our suffering is worse. It's worse that we are suffering than it is that animals are suffering. And it's an interesting idea. I don't know if Alex O'Connor believes this, but I think the guy that I was talking about on this topic believed that animal suffering was worse than human suffering because animals don't have the knowledge of good and evil. They aren't judged. They don't have eternal life. So if they suffer, they don't have the hope of eternal life. And so that's the argument against God being good. Now, the idea that animal suffering is worse than human suffering, like the fact that there's animal suffering is more important, it's worse of a thing than human suffering simply because animals don't go to the afterlife, I think is completely wrong. I think that human suffering is way worse than animal suffering. Now, the people who would say it's not and would say that animal suffering is more significant than human suffering scare me. That's like a scary belief to have. We should be focusing on limiting human suffering. We should be focusing on, and we should be focusing on cures for human diseases first. Like, as long as we have 99.9% of the people who are making cures for humans, and then the 0.01% are making it for animals, sure. Like, of course, I don't want animals to suffer, but I really don't want humans to suffer. That's in my opinion, that's worse. Now, what's the cure to human suffering? We can talk about that. Well, let's go ahead and let's talk about what's the cure for human suffering. You've got to ask yourself, so firstly, you've got to ask yourself, what type of suffering are you going through? And there's one suffering that doesn't have a cause tied to your own actions, and that's like you're born with a disease, you're born without a leg, you're born blind, you're born lame, you can't walk, or you get blind along your life. Like, that type of suffering is not the suffering I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is like you do something wrong and you get punished for it. That's suffering. So what is anxiety and depression? Depression, I've heard it been described as this. So depression is not liking the past, and then anxiety is not desiring the future. So depression is seeing a past that's undesirable, and anxiety is looking towards a future that's undesirable. Now, depression and anxiety are more complicated than that, and there's different forms of it than that, and different ways that you could say this person is depressed, other than them just being depressed about the past. Now, like another reason that you could be sad or be suffering is because one of your family members died, and so obviously that's perfectly reasonable to be sad about that. Now, what is the cure for human suffering? We could eliminate a significant amount of human suffering if everybody acted morally perfect. And so, if you want to end human suffering, of course, make like vaccines and make cures for certain diseases. But I think probably the biggest cause of human suffering is sin. Now, whether or not if everybody on earth acted morally perfect from now on, would we have a significant drop in human suffering? Yes, probably. Now, the sins of the past would still affect us in the future. And that's how bad sin is. So firstly, sin negatively impacts you. Every single sin is bad for you. It's bad for you. Every single sin you commit is making your life worse. But it doesn't end there. It makes your life worse, and it makes the people around you's life worse. Now, it's going to probably impact them less, maybe. It's also going to make the whole world, their lives, worse. Again, it's probably going to impact their life way less. It's also going to impact people into the future. So it hurts you, it hurts people now, and it hurts people in the future, and it hurts your family that's right next to you. So that's really how bad sin is. And if you look at it that way, if you truly understand how terrible sin is for humanity, you would realize, yeah, most of human suffering is caused by sin, by lack of obedience to God. So God created man in his own image. In the image of God, he created them. Male and female, he created them. We kind of already talked about that, but what does that mean to be made in the image of God? Well, we're looking at the 7-day creation, and it's an example of how we are supposed to live our lives. And the Bible also gives us a way to live our life that is morally correct. So being made in the image of God means that we have a certain responsibility. We have a duty here on earth to take on responsibility, to bear our cross, to follow Jesus wherever he goes. So being made in the image of God is like saying, look, you've got stuff you've got to do. So get after it. Fair enough. You know, Jesus says in the Gospels, "Come to me, all who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest." And I don't know that I've fully understood what that means. Because what do you mean? Come to me, all who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. What rest? If you're a follower of Jesus, look, it's not an easy life. And if you call yourself Christian and you say, oh, my life's easy and I'm Christian, then you're not Christian. If you are truly Christian, your life would not be easy. And rightfully so. So why does Jesus say, my burden is light, my weight is easy? I mean, he even says himself, walk down the narrow path. path is narrow, the way is hard, the gate is small. I mean, whoever would follow me, let him deny himself and pick up his cross and follow me. Like, what part of that is easy? I still don't know what to make of it. But it's part of being made in the image of God, that we have to take on responsibility. And if we come to Jesus, his burden is light. His weight is easy. I don't know what that means, I just know it's true. So, well, we're going to have about 15 years before I get to the New Testament anyways. So hopefully I can figure that out in the next 15 years. And God blessed them and said to them, be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth and subdue it. And have dominion over the fish of the sea, the birds of the air, and over every living creature that moves on the earth. And God said, behold, I have given you every plant yielding seed that is on the face of all the earth, and every tree with seed in its fruit. You shall have them for food. And to every beast of the earth, to every bird of the heavens, to everything that creeps on the earth, everything that has the breath of life, I have given every green plant for food. And it was so. So God blesses them and he says, look, I've given you everything you need. And we have been given everything that we need. So, what have we been given? Life, hope, the idea of aiming into the future, of setting things in their place, naming them, subduing them, separating light from darkness, wheat from chaff, the sky from the sea, goats from sheep, and the Word of God, the very Word of God. This we have been given. Be fruitful and multiply. Well, that is a command to reproduce. That is a command to reproduce. But what else could it be conceptualized as? Be fruitful and multiply. Well, it could be referring to your works. Be fruitful, beware of false prophets who come to you in sheep's clothing but inwardly are ravenous wolves. You will know them by their fruits, for are figs picked from thistles? I don't know. I forgot it. You will know them by their fruits. And so fruit in the Bible is the result of your actions, what comes about on the earth because of your actions. And so your fruits can be bad and your fruits can be good. And so this type of fruitful means good fruit. Produce good fruit, bearing some 30, some 60, and some 100-fold. And this commandment still applies to us, both in reproduction and also in doing good deeds. And so we are already told, we're given instruction on how to do so, but now we are being actually told, do what is good. Pursue what is meaningful, not what is expedient. As Peterson would put it in his, wrong way, 12 Rules for Life, right there. I haven't read it yet, but... Alright. And God saw everything that he had made, and behold, it was very good. There was evening and there was morning, the 6th day. So, create things that are good, and if you create enough that is good, it will be very good. We are supposed to be imitators of God. I don't know where it says this. Galatians, maybe? I don't know. The Bible here is calling us to be servants of God, to obey God. And why we should obey God is because He set up the heavens and the earth. He gave us the example of how we are supposed to set up our own heavens and earth, our own creation. And so I truly think that we can take this 6 days of creation and we can apply it to our own lives. But let's go further. The seventh day, so this is chapter 2, verse 1. Thus the heavens and the earth were finished, and all the host of them. And on the seventh day God finished his work that he had done, and he rested on the seventh day from all the work that he had done. So God blessed the seventh day and made it holy, because on it God rested from all the work that he had done in creation. I believe it's the fourth commandment in the Bible, is to keep the Sabbath day holy. And one reason we could have for doing that is because God rested on the seventh day. Now, why do we rest on the seventh day? We rest on the seventh day because we're supposed to, of completed a certain task. Now, of course, you can have a task that might take you 5 years to do, and you can divide that up into each year, and then each year into each month, and then each month into each week. Now, you could say that you have a goal for each year. You have your major goal for the 5 years, and then you have your 5 goals for each year, and then you have 12 goals each year. So 12 times 5 is 60. Yes. And then there's about like 4.5 weeks per month. And then you would have a goal for each month, and then a goal for each week, and then you would complete that goal in 6 days, and on the seventh day you would bless your creation, what you have done. So this 5 days of creation is the ideal life, how we ideally should be living our lives. So let's go back. The first day, God he sets the foundation for light and darkness. The next day, he sets the foundation for the sea and the heavens above, the sky. The reason it's the foundation is because on the first day, he makes light and darkness. On the fourth day, he makes the sun and moon. On the second day, he makes the seas and the sky. On the fifth day, he makes the sea creatures and the flying birds of the air. On the third day, he does 2 acts of creation. He separates the land and the sea, and he names them, subduing them. But he also creates vegetation, just like the 2 acts of creation he does on the 6th day, where he creates the beasts, the living animals, the cattle, the livestock, the cows, the sheep, the pigs, whatever, and then he makes mankind. So there's 2 acts of creation, 2 acts of creation. Okay, and so that's the theme. Well, and so he's still separating. Maybe he's laying the foundation still, yes. So the first 3 days he's laying the foundation, and then the last 3 days he's building upon that foundation. Now on the third day, he doesn't just lay the foundation, He lays the foundation, and then, based on what he's done for that week, he has made that area productive, and then he makes the sun and moon animals and humans, the beast. So what we need to do, we need to split our week up into three sections. The first section is laying the foundation and then making that productive. And then the second half is building upon that foundation even more. And so what he's doing on the third day is he's laying that foundation, and then he's making that foundation stable by putting plants and animals. He's making that creation inhabitable by what he's about to create. He's making it a place, a dwelling place, a good place for Adam and Eve to live, which would be created in the future. And then we build upon that foundation, and then we finish our work, and then we rest and we bless. Now, there is the idea in the Bible that God's not actually resting. He has always been working. But we are to actually rest on the Sabbath day. There's also an idea in the Bible that, okay, well, so let's reread that seventh day. Thus the heavens and the earth were finished, and all the hosts of them. And on the seventh day, God finished all the work that he had done. He rested on the seventh day from all the work that he had done. So God blessed the seventh day and made it holy, because on it God rested from all the work that he had done. Then there was evening, and then there was morning, the seventh day. No, there's no evening and morning. Well, it doesn't say there's an evening and morning. But there's an idea that the seventh day didn't end until man sinned against God. That's whenever the rest ended, right? Because after they got punished, Adam gets punished with work. Now, he was keeping the garden, he was working the garden, but he really begins to work whenever he sins against God. And that's going to be episode 3, probably, where we talk about the sins of Adam and Eve. Next episode, probably next Sunday, is going to be released over chapter 2, verse 3 through verse 25. So 26 verses. 25 verses. And that is the creation of the universe. So go live a life that is similar to what God did in the creation.